On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Coltrin Associates, working with the Salt Lake Olympic Committee, planned to meet Mayor Rudy Giuliani, his staff, and other New York officials in Battery Park to plan the New York City leg of the 2002 Winter Olympics torch relay. That meeting never took place. But what did happen will never be forgotten, as America came under attack, losing nearly 3,000 lives. No one could have predicted how a country would come together against the acts of terror that changed the world. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, Coltrin Associates reflects on that day.
Well, on 9/10, I had dinner with Mitt Romney that evening in Washington, D.C. to talk about the Olympics, and on 9/11 we were scheduled to meet with all the New York City and New York State torchbearers at Battery Park.
I was in the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square in New York City when I got a call from Mark Walker, who was the assistant to the director of communications, and he said, what's happening in your city?
I was on the Amtrak train coming into the city. We were just coming into Penn Station at the time.
So I was coming into the city in New York City in preparation for that meeting. I was on the train nearly to Newark when I noticed that the lady sitting next to me, very substantive lady, was talking, but she was saying things that sounded crazy. She said people were jumping out windows.
He said a plane just crashed into a building, and I thought he meant like a twin-engine Cessna or something.
We thought that a small plane had accidentally diverted and crashed into the World Trade Center.
And then I turned the other way and looked, and I could see one tower already burning.
And as we started listening to other people talk and receive messages on their cell phones, I realized that it wasn't an accident, that it was an attack.
It was total disbelief, complete disbelief. Couldn't understand how that could happen. It sounded unfathomable to me.
I heard the news, I basically saw the news, if you will. I was on the train when it happened, coming into Grand Central Station, and as I was coming up the escalator, I saw TV images of the two towers burning.
And then we got to Newark, and they gave everybody a chance to get off the train. Everybody did except for me. But I had about 15 or 16 people in the city that I was worried about. So I made a decision to come on into the city.
So we got together and decided to try to leave the island, get home.
There were buses going uptown, and obviously people boarded them and were packed to the hilt. People wanted to get on the bus and there was no room. They were banging on the doors and trying to get the bus driver to open the door to let them in. But the bus driver had no more room, so he left the doors closed, and people wanted to start climbing on the bus. There was a moment where the bus, one of the people pulled the mirror off the side of the bus, and you could see the anxiety starting to build, and anger and chaos.
You know, we decided we obviously were going to evacuate the building, so we got all the employees together and our receptionist, and we helped her down the stairs, which was really traumatic. We're on the 10th floor. And she was panicking and upset. So we all kind of came together as a family of sorts, and went down the stairs.
I started walking uptown, and I could not believe how many people were on the streets. It was packed. There were people coming out of buildings, and just everyone was walking uptown in somewhat of a daze. It almost seemed like everyone was in shock at the same time.
My set of needs was to find out where my people were and were they safe. And then we began to search for them, and eventually through a series of phone calls, and they called us. We found them strung from the Bronx to all over the city, and most of them we brought back to the Marriott and sequestered them all in a room in the Marriott.
There, walked all the way there. We got cash. We saw people buying water, and there wasn't panic, but there was just this eerie, evacuation going on where people were just walking, and that's just not a scene that you see in Manhattan.
The night before, people were concerned about Don Rumsfeld and George Bush and a lot of things. The next morning, they were concerned about each other, and that made a huge, huge difference. For a long time afterwards, the country worked and pulled together.
For that moment, I think it was clear that we were all Americans.
Always struck by coming out of Penn Station that morning and seeing that all kinds of people, all different styles, cultures, countries, gathered in a huge circle
I think we knew immediately that the world had changed and that it would never be the same.
Shortly after that morning, there was a lot of discussion on whether or not the Olympics in Salt Lake should be or could be held, and there was some discussion about whether or not maybe the Olympic movement was finished. And there was even considerable discussion about whether or not the United States could host any major event ever again, because who knows? Who knew and who knows what could happen? There was panic, a little bit of panic, a lot of discussion, but as we settled down and started to think about it, and we came to our senses a little bit and realized sort of instinctively that maybe the worst was over, we quickly said something like this in our individual discussions. You know what? Hell no, we're going to put on the Olympics. We are going to do what we said we'd do. We're going to put on the best Olympics in the history of the Olympic movement. We're going to do it in Salt Lake, and the Olympics will go on for many, many years after that. I'll never forget the Olympic torch, which we had passed between the Statue of Liberty and the city of New York the night that the torch came to Manhattan. I think that was so symbolic of what America stands for. America probably doesn't stand for, or shouldn't stand for, the ability to get rich or to make money. America should stand for a place of personal and individual freedom where everybody has a right to think and do what they want to do as long as it's not harmful to everybody else.